You have probably heard that 1 in 3 medieval women did not survive childbirth. It is one of the most repeated facts about the Middle Ages, and it is almost certainly false. This is the story of why giving birth in medieval London was so terrifying anyway. Because the real fear was never about the numbers. It was about everything the women in that room could not control, and the one small soul they were racing against time to save. Using AI trained on medical manuscripts, church records, and the faded prayers women once tied around their own bodies, we rebuild this hidden world, and the women history almost never bothered to name. A night in the early 1400s in a crowded lane near the river. A young wife feels the first true pains, and within the hour her house fills, not with doctors, but with women. Her mother.
Softly now, just breathe. I am right here with you.
Her neighbours. And above all, the midwife, sleeves already rolled, who has done this more times than she could count.
Bring those clean linens over here, Agnes. We must ensure the water stays warm.
The shutters are closed against the cold. A single candle burns. The room is kept warm and dark on purpose, soft as the womb the child is about to leave. And there is not one man inside the building, which is exactly how everyone in that room wants it. That terrifying statistic deserves a second look. When historians actually counted, tracing 102 noblewomen across nearly 3 centuries, the real figure was nothing like 1 in 3. The best estimate for the whole pre-modern era is closer to 1 woman in 80 for any single birth. The overwhelming majority came through.
Oh, look at him. He is beautiful. Welcome, little one.
But here is why the fear was still completely rational. A woman did not give birth once. She did it again and again across her life. And each time, for those hours and the fragile weeks that followed, her risk of not surviving leapt to perhaps 6 times its normal level. The danger was not common. It was simply unavoidable, and it came for everyone eventually. The women who gathered were called her gossips, and that word has a tender origin we have long since forgotten. It comes from godsib, a god-sibling, a spiritual kinswoman. Your gossips were the friends who sat with you through your longest night. The word for our idlest chatter was born in the most serious room a woman ever entered, and the figure at the center of it, the midwife, carries her purpose in her name to this day. Midwife simply means with woman. We picture the medieval midwife as ignorant, a superstitious old woman fumbling in the dark. But these were the most experienced hands for miles. A poor woman attended by her midwife was often safer than a queen surrounded by learned physicians, because the physicians, understanding nothing of infection, carried it from one bedside to the next. If you think those midwives have been robbed of the credit they were owed, tap the like and stand with them. If you think their world was simply too dangerous to romanticize, make that case in the comments. Either way, the candle is burning low, and there is more you need to know. Because for all their skill, the women in that room were fighting an enemy they could not see. There was no understanding of germs, so no one washed their hands, and infection moved invisibly through the cleanest-looking room. There was no real pain relief, and a church that often taught that the pain of birth was a punishment to be endured rather than eased. And if the baby was simply turned the wrong way, there was very little anyone could do but wait and turn the child by hand and pray. I can hardly imagine the helplessness of that. The one tool that might have helped, the forceps, was still 2 centuries away. And when it came, the family who invented it hid it for 100 years, smuggling it into rooms in a locked, gilded box. The medieval room had no such box, only warm hands, old knowledge, and faith. When skill ran out, faith took over, and the objects they reached for are extraordinary. Above all, they called on Saint Margaret of Antioch, the patron saint of childbirth, whose legend said she had been swallowed by a dragon and burst out alive and unharmed, read aloud to labouring women as a promise of safe deliverance. And they used birth girdles, long narrow strips of parchment inked with prayers that a woman wound around her swollen body like a belt of words. One that survives promises that any woman who simply looks upon it shall not perish. Scholars long assumed these were only read, never worn. A few years ago, a team scanned one of these girdles down to the molecule and found the unmistakable traces of a woman who had actually worn it through sweat and labour, holding those words against her skin. I find that almost unbearably moving. If you've ever gripped something small and ordinary just to get through a frightening hour, you already know what that girdle was. Tell me what yours was down below. Faith was not only comfort, it was the heaviest duty in the room. A labouring woman was urged to confess her sins beforehand because everyone understood she was standing at the very edge of life. And the midwife held a power almost no other ordinary person held, and certainly no other woman. For if a newborn was too frail to last its first hours, she alone was permitted to baptise it herself, with plain water and a few words. An unbaptized soul, they believed, could be shut forever from heaven. In that closed and candlelit room, the midwife was trusted to do the work of a priest, to reach for a soul when no one else could. A woman, quietly holding the keys to the next world. It staggers me every time I sit with it. That power made her a person the authorities needed to control. By the close of the Middle Ages and the years just after, a midwife could be licensed and made to swear a remarkable oath. Its words still survive, sworn by a midwife named Eleanor Pead. She swore to use no sorcery in a woman's labour. She swore never to secretly exchange one baby for another. She swore, if a birth went wrong, never to hide it. And, the strangest vow of all, she could be required to press a mother in the depths of her pain to name the true father of her child. A name spoken in that hour was thought to be a name spoken in honesty. She was trusted with life and with souls, and watched all at once. And the danger did not end when the baby finally cried. The most perilous stretch was often the quiet days afterward, when a fever could steal away a woman who had already survived the worst. It reached even the highest in the land. Elizabeth of York, Queen of England, came safely through the birth of her 7th child in the Tower of London. And then, 9 days later, on her own 37th birthday, the fever took her. A queen, with every physician in the kingdom at her door, and it changed nothing. Those who came through were kept in their warm, shuttered room for weeks, resting among the women who had carried them through the night. About 40 days later came a ceremony called churching, when the mother walked back into the world and into her parish church, carrying a candle to give thanks simply for being alive. It was the community's quiet way of saying what everyone had feared to say out loud. You went to the very edge, and you came home. Why was birth in medieval London so terrifying? Not because the people in that room were careless or backward. They were brave and skilled and doing everything right in a world that could not yet see the enemy it was fighting. The fear was honest. Every woman who stepped into that candlelit room knew the truth the prayers were trying to soften, that she was risking everything, to give everything, and the proof is you. Trace any family back far enough and you find a woman who walked into a room like this one and walked back out. And the steady hands of some midwife kneeling in the dark, whose name was never written down. We are the team behind History Recreated, and we go looking for the heroines history forgot to thank, whose courage carried the world and earned no monument at all. If this one stayed with you, subscribe and step into the next vanished room with us, and leave us the name of a forgotten life you would want us to bring back into the light. Because they met the dark with nothing but warm hands and old prayers, and still somehow they carried us all through.